Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today in today's webinar. My name is Ardian Berisha and I am the Portfolio Marketing Manager for Information Security and Management at PCB. In today's presentation, we will discuss about the best practices to perform an ISMS internal audit based on ISO 27001. Our presenter for today is Mr. Chandra Mohan Govindarajula, who has 16 years of working experience as an implementer, lead auditor, and also Q&A and QSC. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few technical points so you know how to participate in today's event. You will have the opportunity to submit written questions to today's presenter by typing your questions in the question pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentations, as we will collect and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. Now, without further ado, we will turn over to Mr. Chandra. Mr. Chandra, please, you may start with your presentation.
Thank you, Adi. Hello, everyone. Wherever you are, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. So, today's webinar is let us understand the best practices to perform the Information Security Management System internal audit based on 27001-2013. Now, just a brief about myself. As Adin already told you that I have about 16 years of working experience as an implementer, trainer, auditor, and of course different quality portfolios. I work with different organizations. Right now I'm working as a lead information security for Value Labs India. Today's agenda would be for the internal information security audit management system, audit definitions, planning and preparation for the audit, conducting the audit, reporting the audit findings, audit closure, and of course finally the questions. Now let us see some of the definitions that we commonly use. The first one is, what is an audit? As of ISO 27001 or any other information security standard or any other standard, the audit definition is systematic, independent, and documented process for obtaining audit evidence and evaluating it objectively to determine the extent to which the audit criteria are fulfilled. Now, if you see, there are two words that are very important in this whole of a definition. The first one is audit evidence, the other one is audit criteria. The audit evidence is nothing but the records, statements of fact, or other information which are relevant to the audit criteria, which can be verifiable. And then audit evidence can be qualitative or quantitative. And then criteria talks about the policies, procedures, requirements such as ISO 27001 in this case on this topic. That's what the requirement is all about. Now, who is the auditor? The person who is qualified to perform the audit is considered as an auditor. We will see in detail what are the prerequisites to become an auditor. And then an auditee is an individual or an organization or a function that is being audited. Now, objective evidence. The data supporting the existence or verifying of something. The objective evidence may be obtained through measurement, observation, test, or other means. Observation, a statement of fact that made during an audit and substantiated by the audit evidence. What is a non-conformity? Non-fulfillment of requirement is a non-conformity. Requirement again points to ISO 27000 requirement. Here in this case, the purpose of an audit is to collect object evidence to permit an information judgment about the status of information security management system in an organization, to evaluate the need of improvement or corrective actions. The audit action is a fact-finding exercise. It's not a fault-finding mission. Why are we doing the audit? Is to find the facts, not to find the faults with the individuals or the organization. Audit objective, to verify system in compliance with the standard requirements, in this case is ISO 27001-2013, or define system implementation or implemented system effectiveness or organization's own requirements. That's what the objective of an audit. Now let us see some of the roles and responsibilities in terms of the internal audit. First, we'll talk about the internal auditor responsibility. Compliance and acceptable audit requirements, communicating and then clarifying the requirements, planning and carrying out the assigned responsibilities, documenting and observation of reports, retaining and safeguarding documents, cooperate with the audit team and the auditors, and of course open-minded and mature. An auditee inform related employees about the scope of the audit, provide access and facilitate the audit evidence, be prepared to face the audit as per the schedule, attend the opening and closing meeting, cooperate with the auditors, determine the initial corrective actions based on the audit findings or the report or observations of the audit. Now, skills required for the audit: communicating skills, oral and written, tactful, flexible, persistent, and of course time management is the most important thing, because the audit is planned based on the schedule. It's a fact finding, as we discussed already. Listening, observing, questioning and collecting samples, examining and tracing the audits, judgment and then objectivity, and most importantly integrity. Confidentiality, integrity and availability are the three pillars of information security management system. The auditor must have the quality of integrity, and of course he or she should maintain the confidentiality of the information that he or she collects during the audit. And of course human aspects in terms of audit: developing interest with sincerity and friendliness, be careful in giving advice, because auditor is not a consulting. Audit is to find the facts, is to find the requirements are fulfilled or not. So you have to be very careful when you are guiding something or suggesting something, recognizing that people hear what they want to hear, but then you have to be firm on what is the requirement, and then of course listen to understand what the auditee is saying, and be sensitive and feeling an attitude and motivate them, and then responsible for neutral manner, and then repeat and rephrase, acknowledge and rephrase whatever your understanding as an auditor. Is that correct, or is it something different what that auditee is trying to say? And then of course you tend to meet different types of auditees as well. Somebody would be voluntarily sharing the information, somebody would try to deviate the fact, somebody would be arguing, somebody would be cooperating, of course, and there are situations where the auditee may feel that he is more qualified than you as an auditor. So these are all the kinds of reactions that you may find when you are actually performing an audit. So as an auditor, you should know how to face these things and come out with flying colors, because the objective of the audit is to check for the requirements fulfillment or not, audit criteria and audit evidence is fulfilled or not. Of course, planning for the audit, objective, scope of the audit, focus areas of the audit, schedule, and who will be the team. If the audit is more than one individual, so who will be the lead auditor, who will be the audit team members, and then what are the reference documents that you should look at. And then of course, while preparing the audit, as an auditor, you should study the objective, scope, focus areas, functions, projects, departments, study previous audit reports or anything, and of course try to prepare a checklist or a worksheet or a working document that will help you as an auditor while performing the audit. But the checklist should not be the basis for the audit. And then of course, as an auditor, organize for and the preparation of to face the audit. That is what is expected from the auditor. Of course, let's come to the checklist. Checklist will keep the audit objectives clear, and then of course evidence is planned, and then maintains the audit pace and consistency, so that as an auditor you don't miss out on any points or the areas that needs to be checked. Reduces the bias of the auditor, reduces the workload during the audit, and then of course it reduces the audit sampling, There is no ideal checklist. Whatever the checklist that you prepare is standard, and there is ISO 27001 doesn't recommend any format for the checklist as well. And of course, conducting the audit, opening meeting is the first part of the conducting an audit, where the purpose and the ease of opening meeting is to introduce the team and the objective and the scope, and then understand the schedule, and then understand the facilities and explain the process to the whole of the organization, function, or the auditees. That is the purpose of conducting the opening meeting. Then the process of audit talks about the initiation of the audit, investigation, verification, identification, and of course finally reporting the audit. Well, the audit techniques would be collecting the samples, talking to people, or interviewing, and of course looking at the traces of the audit. Collecting samples, you can check the hard copies of the sample for the defense of evidence as an evidence, or you can check the soft copies. ISO 27001 doesn't recommend anything. You can take anything as an evidence. And of course, sampling, audit sampling exercise. Sampling must be taken for every control or a clause that is acceptable to the organization, that is applicable to the organization as part of SOA, Statement of Applicability. And of course, samples must be taken. Typically varies from minimum of 3 samples to a maximum of 12 samples. And of course, samples have to be selected randomly by the auditor, not given by the auditee. And of course, the results is unbiased, objective, and of course defensible, and then repeatable. So this is what the technique of collecting samples is always very important in any audit area, because audit the sample is the basis of performing the evidence for the audit. And of course, conducting the audit, interviews, ask right questions, prepare a list of questions that needs to be asked, and then put people at ease. Because when you are conducting an audit, people are already tensed up. They would get frightened, and then they may give information, even though information they won't be able to tell you that information. So we need to be friendly with the auditees, make them at ease, and then explain the purpose why you are talking to them, find out what auditee is doing by asking them, and then analyze the auditee is what is doing, and then make tentative conclusions, explain the next step, and then exhibit professionalism at every step. That's what they interview. And of course, tracing used to collect evidence during the audit, and whenever you collect an evidence, you have to trace it back to a control or a process or a procedure, involve almost every facet of the process. And of course, it also results in well-defined picture of the actual practice which is happening. And of course, mechanism of tracing is transaction sequence, date sequence, or task sequence. Anyone you can use to trace the samples. And finally, verification, examine each individual document or record, collect all evidences, documents, records, plans, schedule, check actual practice against the defined process to see whether any deviation from the practice that has been defined, are they following the same process that has been defined in the process document. Make note of what you see as an auditor, and then make note of discrepancies as well, or deviations as well, because this will help in sharing the audit report. And taking notes is the most fundamental thing as an auditor, because it's as a reference, it is also forms as an object evidence. And of course, it is a statement, and then document numbering, and then revisions, policies, procedures, records, the person or the auditee whom you are talking to, all this needs to be documented. And of course, identifying problems, focus on the factors critical to information security, only decide whether or not auditee is in control or not, Does he know what he is doing? Consider if there is any further symptoms that may lead to a non-conformity. Could this be a minor problem, be a symptom to a fatal condition, and whether it is a process that could be the root cause lie, or always verify the evidence of a non-compliance. So why it is a non-compliance, you have to verify and also have to explain. We will see what is a non-compliance at the later slides. And then audit observations, of course, list problems, possible non-compliance, identify the objective evidence, of course, keep the auditee informed. The most important thing, it should not be a surprise for the auditee in the closing meeting. At every step, you as an auditor has to communicate to the auditee, explain to him what is going on, what have you checked. If it is a good thing, you have to explain. If it is a not so good thing also, then you have to explain. And of course, closure of the audit, thank the auditee teams, of course, appreciate, acknowledge their help and cooperation, and of course, brief them on, of course, you don't need to give the actual details of non-conformity, but then you have to summarize the findings and then you close the audit. Finally, once the audit is completed, report the audit findings. Audit findings, of course, facts acknowledged by the auditee at that time, they were found using only objective evidence. This is where you have to tell the auditees at every step that this is what is not being followed as per the standard requirement. That's why they will acknowledge the fact that it is not following. Where was the non-conformity observed? Why it is a non-conformity? Who was involved? Only when non-conformity is based on admissible spoken evidence. Of course, but you will not point out the individual here as responsible, because this is a process audit, not a person audit. Non-conformity, we also call it as an NC. There are two categorizations of non-conformities, major non-conformity and minor non-conformity. And minor non-conformity is an isolated witness incident or a failure to comply with the procedure or information security management system requirements of ISO 27001-2013, a minor problem that wants attention. Of course, it's a one-off incident, right? Major non-conformity, a significant non-conformity with the requirements of ISO 27001 standard, a complete failure of complete system or lack of information security management system. So that can be implemented going forward. So you have to report that as a non-conformity, so the auditees will see, understand what is the requirement and then why it is a non-conformity. We'll see in the next slide, couple of slides, how to write a non-conformity as well. And then continuing with the reporting audit findings, the non-conformities reporting, the objective of non-conformity writing is to get effective corrective actions. That's what the objective. The purpose of non-conformity is not to tell them that you're not doing it, but to tell them, to explain how to do that, how to close that hole, how to close that gap, so that the fulfillments are done as per the requirement. Complete and accurate non-conformity statements help in causal analysis. What is the cause? What is the root cause? You know, non-conformity description can be short, but should contain all the relevant facts. And of course, finally the report, audit information, general observations, good points or points for improvement, non-conformity, and of course, is there any improvement opportunities that as an auditor you would see? Because the auditors have more experience when you look at different processes. So they may, there are certain things which you can suggest to the auditors, but not as a consultancy point of view. They said that you may do this, but auditee, it's up to the auditee. They may accept, they may not accept. Okay. Now let's see an example of the non-conformity. Now, what is what, where, why? These are the three most important things when you talk about non-conformity. What was found, where it was found, why it is a non-conformity. I've just dropped down something here. What? Disciplinary process is not evident. That is what is found, where while performing human resource department of audit for human resource department of PCB at conference hall, auditing Mr. Ali. Okay, sorry Ali, I'm giving you NC on this. Why? ISO 27001:2013 Information Security Management System Control A, that is NXA 7.2.3 says, there shall be a formal and communicated disciplinary process in place to take action against employees who have committed an information security breach. Okay, so that's where we have to understand. So that is not there. So that's why we are giving a non-conformity. So of course, closure of the audit. The closure of a non-conformity, closure actions, the actions taken to correct the non-conformity wherever possible, the closure actions to be implemented by the auditing team, and then closure actions have to be verified by the auditor to see, yes, they have done the root cause analysis, and then this can be closed, this non-conformity can be closed, or a causal analysis for non-conformity, cause and effect analysis, cause category, control failure, corrective action, functional, project-wise, or organization level, anything that the auditing team can take to close the non-conformity that was observed. Okay, and of course, continuing with the audit closure, audit report preparation, summary of the audit plan, and then planned and then conducted, analysis of audit coverage and non-conformities, and then a recurrence of non-conformities, corrective action and schedules, all that will be documented in an audit report, and then that will be submitted to the auditees so that they follow, adhere, and then there will be timelines that will be asked to, and then based on those timelines, the corrective actions must be submitted to the auditor for review for the closure of non-conformities. And finally, the closing meeting. The closing meeting again will have top management, functional heads, that is auditor, auditees, auditors, and of course lead auditor if it is there. And then audit report distribution, sharing of the audit findings, and of course agreed upon the corrective action plans, and of course the timelines. So that's where the closure of the audit. Now we come to the end of the webinar. Now, thank you very much for taking time, and this is my contact number and email ID. If you have any questions, I'm ready to take.
Thank you, Chandra, for this great presentation. We want to inform you that PCB provides training and certification services for ISO 27001 Introduction, Foundation, Lead Implementer, and Lead Auditor. The training is designed to provide you the required knowledge to carry out audits of information security management systems against ISO 27001 and be able to run the processes that are involved in implementing ISMS as defined in ISO 27001. The exam and the certification fees are included in the training price, and also participation certificate of CPDs will be issued to participants. For more information, please visit our website www.pcb.com/training. Now we will go ahead and take some time to answer some of the questions from the attendees regarding to today's topic. The first question from one attendee is, if someone is not having any physical evidence and they are just conforming verbally, shall we accept that kind of evidence?
Oh, very good question. Absolutely no, because the ISO 27001 says that evidences has to be documented. If you see the standard, most of the places they say that documented information, policy has to be documented, procedures needs to be documented. So if they don't have a document, now everything is turning into soft copies. They can demonstrate the evidence online or on a tool or on a software or on a website. That's acceptable. But verbal evidence is not at all acceptable.
Thank you, Chandra. Another question is, should the internal audit always cover the whole ISMS?
Very good question. Yes, internal audit should be planned in such a way that all of the functions of the organization shall need to be covered, because if you do not cover all the functions based on the requirements of the standard, you will not understand whether you are completely fulfilling the requirements or not. I see my experience I share with you as an auditor. I've been auditing small, medium, large organizations in India. They say that, okay, we're going to cover A, B, C, D functions in this schedule, and then the E, F, G, H will cover in the next schedule. That is one of the methods that they do, but then end of the year they try to cover all the functions.
Thank you, Chandra. Now the last question for today's webinar is how can the importance of processes be shown in the internal audit plan? Is there a recommended time frame in which an internal audit should be conducted? For example, 6 months in advance of the external audit.
Yes, absolutely right. See, the ISO 27001 standard doesn't say, if you see that internal audit clause, the audit has to be conducted at planned intervals. They don't define a timelines. But as a thumb rule, as you rightly pointed out, that before the external audit, it should always be recommended to have an internal audit. And of course, the internal audit schedule usually is quarterly or once in 6 months.
Thank you, Chandra, once again for this great presentation, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. I would like to let you know that this webinar will be recorded and posted to our website as well as on our YouTube channel. Once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey about the presentation, and we would appreciate it if you complete it and provide us with your feedback. Also, if you are aware of a topic that you would like to discuss and participants would benefit from, please feel free to write down your suggestions. We would like to inform you that next Wednesday we will present a webinar about a new security management approach for agile environments. Thank you all and have a great day.